Welcome, Shelley. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me in.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while because we connected such a long time ago, didn't we?
Yeah. Back at I think it's the beginning of the summer, kind of June,
Yes,
July time.
yes. Yeah, it's been a while, and I'm really curious to know about you. And we are definitely going to get into the topic that we have chosen for today because it is so amazing, the light bulb of limiting beliefs and life's little triggers. We will talk about those light bulbs, but before we do that, why don't you share with us what is your story?
So my story, I will try not to go on too long. I guess let's start with fairly societal upbringing. That standard: work hard at school, do well in your exams, get out there, get a good job, earn a good living, nice benefits package. And that's what I did because that was the life I knew. And actually, I really enjoyed that. So my background is a 25-year corporate career. I started out in retail, and I worked through the ranks. I kind of climbed the corporate ladder, and I moved over into hospitality, food and beverage about 15 years ago. I've worked for a number of big retailers, big food and beverage businesses that I am prepared to put money on the table that everybody that listens to this will have been in at least once. I say that with some conviction because I worked with Tesco for about 7 years, so I'm pretty confident. And in short, that was my path. I made a decision very, very early on. I was quite ambitious, quite driven. I was going to climb the ladder, I was going to get to the top of the ladder, and I was going to have a very nice life. And off I went. And that kind of went according to plan, to be honest. And I, probably like many people, I know there's some corporates in the group, I'm sure there's some that maybe are ex-corporate and now running their own businesses, but many of us probably worked a little bit hard at points. I certainly put in all the hours because I was driven and ambitious. I worked away quite a lot, and actually, if I kind of run forward to the last role I had, so I worked for a very well-known UK holiday business, a caravan park business. I was responsible for the whole of the UK, and I was head of their food and beverage business. And I really loved my job. Okay, I loved that I got to go to the seaside. I loved that I was working in restaurants and bars, so I was kind of doing quite a lot of nice food stuff and drink stuff, and I was really enjoying things and working really hard at it. But in the background, life had changed for me. So in short, what happened was I met my husband, which is a good thing. I met my husband and we decided to get married. And I was heading for 40. So I hit 40, and actually I had a health scare, and quite a significant health scare. So I'm very happy to share a lump was what we spotted, actually, a small lump in my throat. It got bigger quite quickly. We went through a series of tests. I'm really pleased to say that actually I was very fortunate. It wasn't the word that we all dread hearing, the C word, before COVID, of course. It was benign, but it was removed. And actually that was the first time I'd ever been in hospital. I'd ever had anything wrong with me. And I guess the first time I realised perhaps I wasn't quite as indestructible as I thought I had been. So that was the first thing. So I turned 40 and I had a health scare. The other really big shift in mine and my husband's life is that my father-in-law was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at the age of 61. And sadly, 3 years later, he lost his battle, if you like. So we watched a strong, independent business owner, actually, as we all know, or anyone that's experienced Alzheimer's, we know what happens. We kind of watch that deterioration. And for me, that had a really big impact. Yes, it was my in-laws, but watching that happen, and my in-laws had retired early. They had bought a property in Italy and rebuilt it. They were living an incredible life, but actually they hadn't really got to live that. So for me, questions had started. For me, I'd been on this train, if you like, for 25 years, heading towards the top. I was, getting closer and closer. And I guess the questions were more about, is this really what I want for the next 20 years? Is it really worth all the hours? Is it really worth being away as much as I was? I was actually away from home up in Scotland, in a very nice part of the world, on the day that my father-in-law passed away, and I couldn't get home. So these little things had got me asking questions. Now, if I could just kind of go back into that career I had, the thing I loved the most about all of the work I did was the people I worked with. And actually my I now realise it was my superpower. I probably didn't at the time. What I was great at was working with individuals and helping them believe in themselves and realise how good they could be, and actually applying that and learning and growing to be the best they can. I had many, many people that worked for me that overtook me, but I took such joy out of helping others just become the best they could be and go on to do bigger things. So while my father-in-law was ill and the questions had started and I was kind of having these conversations with my husband, I worked with a coach. So I worked with a coach, and I'd worked with a coach in my corporate life. I'd been very fortunate. I'd had that experience. I'd also had lots of leadership development. I'd been exposed to kind of the personality profiling and all that. I was really interested in all that. I started working with a coach because I was just asking these questions. I needed some help answering them. I came out of that coaching experience with clarity and actually a bit of an obsession that I want to do what you're doing. That's what I want to do. I have no idea where this is going. I had no aspirations at this point to run my own business, I might add as well. So I didn't know anybody that ran their own businesses. I didn't grow up in that world. I 25 years of corporate. My whole life was working with other people that worked for other people. But I decided I wanted to train as a coach. And I think at that time, I knew at that time, I thought I'd just use these skills in the workplace more. I'd just be even better for the people that I worked with. And so I began training as a coach. I trained with the Coaching Academy, which some people in the group may have heard of, and still in the corporate role. So still working fairly long hours, let's say, still working away, etc., etc. As I said, my father-in-law passed away. He passed away in 2018, and I started training as a coach at the back end of 2017. So my father-in-law passed away, and then I qualified as a coach, and I was like, great, I've got this qualification. Not really sure what I'm going to do with it now. This is all good. Now, what happened next was 7 months after my father-in-law passed away, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she passed away 3 months later. I don't share that for anyone. It's no worries me moment. I mean, I would, if I could change anything and bring them back, of course I would, like so many, I'm sure. But in short, that was the final trigger, I guess, the real kind of, right, what are we doing? Now, when my father-in-law passed away, having watched that deterioration, that journey over the 3 years, we'd of course had lots of, life is short, life is precious, we're going to do more. We went on a ridiculously expensive holiday. We didn't really change our lives. Yes, I'd trained as a coach, but I was still working. My mother-in-law, as I say, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. 3 months later, we said goodbye to her. So we lost them both in less than 12 months. And for me, that was enough to say something has to shift and something has to change. Now, saying that and then doing it, two very different things. Yeah. So I started to explore, okay, what am I really doing with this coaching? And I set up my private practice in the background, but I was still in my corporate role. So I was still working all the hours. I was still traveling across the country, but in my spare time, it was like a little hobby, but I was now, earning a little income too. The more I did, the more I loved. The more I was working with people, the more I wanted to. And very quickly, of course, as you'd expect, I couldn't do both. I couldn't do both as brilliantly as I wanted to, and I couldn't give both my all. And I am forever grateful to my husband, because actually he essentially gave me the permission slip. So one day he came home, and he'd obviously lost both of his parents in the last 12 months. So he'd gone through his own transition, and he came home one day and said, I think you should leave. And I went, what? Because actually, as wonderful as that is, kind of meant I didn't have any more excuses. And that was in September of 2019. We talked that through. I could have gone into a lot of overthinking. I am a bit of an action driver. It's where my career came from. And so actually, I resigned from my position in 2019. I worked a significant notice period. I certainly wasn't going to burn any bridges. I wanted to keep that security blanket. But the long and the short of it is, in December 2019, I left my corporate office for the last time. January 2020, I was ready. It was a new year, a new decade. I was all in. I was going for it. Now, of course, we all know what happened in 2020.
That year just disappeared from the calendar.
Oh, my word. What an interesting start to entrepreneur, self-employed life it was. And actually, here's one of the first things I'll say. We never know what's coming next. And actually, we spend a lot of time thinking about what might happen, what if I do, what if I don't, what will people think, worrying about what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen after this call, Pearl. I don't want to know what's going to happen tomorrow. If I had known in December 2019 what was coming in 2020, I would not have left my job. So I am forever glad I did not know what was coming. I am forever glad that none of us knew what was coming. And I'm not glad for what happened. Of course I'm not. We've all got our stories to tell of that. But I'm glad I didn't know, because I'm so glad I left. And I'm so glad that I got to start this journey. And my God, did I wobble in March when things were looking like they were going where they were. And on March the 20th, when Boris announced what he announced, and, of course I did. And I absolutely, the first thing I said was, shall I call my old boss? Shall I, see if he'll take me back? And he probably would have, actually. So I'm glad I didn't pick up that phone. But I carried on through, and here I am doing what I love to do. In terms of the story continues, my husband was then actually made redundant at the height of the pandemic. So that was a little bit of a curveball we were further not expecting, but we've come through that. And now I get to do this day in, day out. I work largely with women. I do work with gents, but I'm really passionate about helping women work out what they really want to do. And it's not always about leaving their jobs. Okay, so that was my path, but it's not everybody's path. But it is about acknowledging and recognizing what you really want your life to be like, and what's not working for you right now, what's stopping you doing something about it, which has been the game changer for me. And then helping people do something about it. I am action driven. So I'm all about mindset and understanding what's going on in here, but more importantly, taking practical action to achieve the things you want. And I still have dreams, lots and lots of big dreams that I want to achieve. The first one was this, and here I am doing it. So that's the whistle stop tour of my story and how I got to here.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. What a beautiful journey.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's a story that so many of us will relate to. I can find so many threads of my own story in yours. The whole upbringing and having that normal life, school, college, uni, corporate world, working hard for performance ratings and bonuses, walking up the corporate ladder and loving it, thriving there. And then something happens and we change as people. We make different choices. We make different decisions. So really well done, you. Well done.
You so much. Thank you. Yeah, when you say it out loud, when anyone tells their story, actually, even you're allowed to have a moment of, God, yeah, I've done that. And as you say, so many pieces I want to pick up on there. We are not, all of us, generally speaking, everybody is schooled to move into the world of employment, to become an employee. And actually, I was saying to someone a couple of months ago that actually I realised that my childhood, my teen years, my early 20s, my 20s, my 30s even, for me, an entrepreneur, in my head, an entrepreneur was American, first of all. So they were rich and very wealthy, rich, probably very good looking. And they had some crazy ass idea that they'd made their millions from. That to me was an entrepreneur. So actually coming into self-employed life, I really struggled to call myself an entrepreneur and think of myself like that, because that was what I tagged as an entrepreneur. And as I say, we didn't know people that ran their own businesses. We, all of our family friends, all of my family, all of my life had been about going into employed life. And so, discovering this whole world and actually changing my whole thought process about, I can do this. It's going to take a lot of learning, and it has, and it still does.
Yes.
Just realizing that, we can all change our path.
I get this journey that you're talking about because I come from a similar background. All our family is into employment. We do that standard college, uni, corporate world thing. So discovering the world of self-employment and coaching, people don't even understand in my world, well, in my family, what coaching is by and large, other than the corporate coaching thing.
Yep.
And one of the toughest things, one of the most challenging things for me was running this business with the mindset of an employee. That's what I tried doing in the beginning, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work.
Absolutely. Well, and the challenge there as well. Funny, I was listening to a podcast just this morning about this very subject, but actually it's that piece where we have the conflict, don't we? So we can't run our businesses with the mindset of an employee, but we are also our employee, because we're wearing all the hats. Until you grow your business and you can have support or your own team, you're the CEO, but you're also the employee. And so actually there's a bit about multi-mindset tasking, if you like, because, we have to behave like an employee in some elements because there's things that need to be done and we have to hold ourselves accountable because we're also the CEO of our business. And that actually is the toughest part of the first stage of business, being both of those things. But overarching it with call it the CEO mindset, the owner, but like the business owner, whatever it is mindset, but that a very different mindset to that we've grown up with, we've known all of our lives when you shift.
Yeah. In your story, I absolutely love the bit wherein you say that your family went through traumatic times and you paused and learned from those experiences. It is so easy to let those experiences slide and in the moment say, yeah, we are going to live more fully. We are going to go on more holidays. We are going to spend more quality time together, and then just not do them.
Yeah.
So wonderful that you were able to glean those learnings and really implement them.
And you know what? Let's be really honest. After my father-in-law passed away, we said all those things. We're going to make changes. We're going to do things differently. We're not going to work all these silly hours. We're going to have more quality time. And we did initially. And then actually we did exactly what you just described, because we do, don't we? We slip back, we go back to normal because normal is safe, and we know, we rationalize and we start, and we were definitely slipping back. And sadly it was a second traumatic wake-up call that brought us back, and actually was the moment we said, right, this time. And I remember us having the conversation. I remember actually my husband and I saying, we said we would make changes last time, and actually we did, but we didn't, because we didn't keep them in place. So what are we doing differently this time? And I know lots of people have been through that with COVID. Lots of people have come through this journey of the last 18 months saying, I don't want to go back to how it was. And I implore with anybody out there, if you've been having that conversation, do a little sense check with yourself now, because the world is moving forwards to whatever it becomes now. And I don't think we'll ever be as we were. I think we are all changed forever as a result of the last 18 months. But I implore with anybody out there, maybe have a little sense check of yourself. Where are you at? And are little things creeping back in that you didn't want to? And what can you do about that? Because we all do it. And don't beat yourself up for it, but use the opportunity for a little reflection and check-in.
Yeah. That is so important. That check-in is so important. So easy to let go of things, because we can come off one hamster wheel and get on another hamster wheel of a different kind. I would say this is the loop that I found myself in. Came off the corporate hamster wheel, became a business owner, sorted my mindset out, and very driven, ambitious as a person. And then I got on to this second hamster wheel of entrepreneurship and making my business work. And after some time, I realized, well, it's the same shit.
Absolutely. The times I've had this conversation over the last few months, absolutely that, because then we're on a new hamster wheel, but absolutely same. I've got to do everything. I'm working all the hours, and everywhere I look, everybody's doing all this other stuff, and I should be doing that too. Absolutely. We still have to keep ourselves in check now, and that process in everything, in business, in life, we have to do that, because we are conditioned to normalize things. That's what we do, because we kind of have to. Don't get me wrong. We can't fight against everything all the time. But that check-in of, is your life serving you well right now? And actually, what were the little conversations you had with yourself, and are you still living by those? Yeah. That's really it's made me giggle a little bit, because I can totally resonate with that. Absolutely. Life is going to be so different when I'm running my own business 3 months in. Okay, life isn't that different. I'm still working on this, and we know the things we need to do, but actually there's that piece around, do I need to do all of these things? And actually, to your point, am I just kind of slipping straight back into employee mindset? And I often say to people, like, you read all these stories of the overnight success and the 6-7 figure businesses, and congratulations and well done to everybody. It took me 25 years to climb that ladder in corporate, and I've been doing this for 2 years. So I'm not going to give myself a hard time for not being at the top of the new entrepreneurial ladder right now, because whilst I'm hoping it doesn't take me another 25 years, ultimately I need to give myself some reality check. These things don't happen overnight, and actually I had to work hard at a lot of stuff there, and now I'm changing a whole way of living and working and being. So
I'm smiling because that resonated so deeply. I was having one of those poor me moments one day, and the whole story that was going in my head was, I was there when I left, and now I'm here, whatever that level means, and just using it.
Yeah.
And I had been beating myself over it for some time and done a pretty good job at it. And then one day in that moment, it occurred to me that I had built that career. And I've just started doing this, and I was comparing two different things.
Yeah, apples
and it wasn't right.
And look, I mean, this can go in so many directions, this conversation. You know, I love social media. I do. I love it. It's a blessing and a curse. Okay, let's all be honest. I love it for all that it can give. I love it, you know, for the marketing it gives me. I love it for the connections it gives me. But you know, I have to work hard at not letting myself go in the other direction too. And we are surrounded by everybody that is doing brilliantly or says they're doing brilliantly, and I'm not disregarding those stories at all. But in all of that, we just have to remember that everybody's version of success, first of all, is very different as well. And that's the other piece. We can get so caught up in what everybody else. And to your point, you know, beating ourselves up over where I was actually, my husband put it brilliantly the other day. So my husband works in the food and beverage industry. And he said, you know, most people know that when you start a business, you don't expect to make any money for the first 3 years. And yet everyone, and he says, you and your entrepreneurial friends, you're giving yourself so much of a hard time that you should be turning this massive profit in your first 2 and 3 years of business. You know, no business model in corporate world would ever expect that return that quickly. And again, it's that bit, we just put so much pressure on our shoulders. All these things are just things to remember, you know, when you're having those, we all do that. I total meltdown last week, exactly the same, like literally, I can't do this. What was I thinking? We're allowed those. We're allowed to sit in them and stay there.
Yes. Oh, these amazing light bulb moments. Life-changing, I would say. And that leads us so beautifully into the topic that we have chosen for today, which is the light bulb of limiting beliefs and life's little triggers. So say more.
So I have become a little bit obsessed, let's say, with understanding limiting beliefs. I guess the labels, actually. So, you know, there's all the labels out there, like limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome, self-sabotage. There's lots of big labels out there. When I first started this journey, I, like so many, all of my colleagues, thought that I would naturally coach women in the corporate world, probably around kind of balancing it all, and maybe those that wanted to leave the corporate world. And I very quickly realised that's not that I didn't want to do it, but actually I was getting to know more and more people in the small business world. I don't even like using the word small, so in the business world, in the business owner world. And actually one of the things that really resonated with them when I was talking to them was that I had this background, this kind of quite commercial background, but also because I'd always led teams of people and everything I'd been about was actually about helping people do the best they could do, I had this natural affinity around kind of confidence building. But I had a bit of resistance to the whole confidence coach word. That was me, okay? If you had said to me, well, if you said 5 years ago I'd be running my own business, I'd have been like, don't be ridiculous. No. But when I started the coaching journey, when I was training and I learned about limiting beliefs, this was like game changing. I'd never heard of a limiting belief. Why would I? Nobody talked to me about that stuff. The coach I'd worked with hadn't talked about limiting beliefs. She was quite practical. So it was very much about what's the goal, what do you need to do, where do you get. So I learned this term, and then I learned about what they were. And, you know, for anyone that's watching, I'm sure many people have heard of it, but I'm always really clear about just in case. So a limiting belief is exactly what it says on the tin, a belief that limits us. Okay. Boom. Okay, hang on a sec. That means something for me. Now, I've got lots of beliefs about myself, and they're not all very positive. Yeah. And so I started kind of exploring and reading. I'm a bit of a reader. I like to kind of read real stories as well as kind of the research behind. And I was in my training as well. And I guess the piece, this is a true story. So I didn't have a terrible childhood or anything like that. As I said, it was fairly standard. You know, we weren't rich, we weren't poor. It wasn't a wonderful, it wasn't a terrible. I don't have awful memories. I don't necessarily have, you know, this rose-tinted glasses view of my childhood either. And, you know, it was work hard, as my parents did. I was walking along the street with my husband. I was about 6 months into my coaching training, my qualification journey. I just learned about this thing called limiting beliefs. And so all these seeds had been planted. And I remember walking down the street and suddenly stopping in the middle of the street. And I'm telling the story before I go into more of the how and the what. I remember stopping in the middle of the street and just going, oh my God, oh my word. Oh, that makes so much sense. And my husband was like, what on earth are you talking about? What's going on? Literally in the middle of the street. I was walking down the street where we live. And I shared something that had occurred, something a teacher had said to me when I was young. And I'll share that. So when I was young, and I was quite academic, you know, I worked quite hard, and a particular teacher, which I won't name her, a particular teacher who I really looked up to, she said to me, it's okay, Shelley, not everybody's good at art, but you're really good at maths. I didn't hear you're really good at maths. What I heard is you're not very good at art. I have spent my life saying I'm not creative, I'm not good at art. I feel physically sick if someone mentions, like, do you fancy a game of Pictionary when I'm out with my friend, if we're having a friend's night in? No, thank you, I can't draw. I mean, honestly, like every phrase that you could possibly, anything to get out of ever taking a pen to paper, because I'm no good at art. And actually, this is the abridged version, of course. This is a really good example of realizing something so small, so a statement that was never meant to have that level of impact has been built upon and built upon and built upon. I am one of 4 girls. And my mother won't mind me saying that she always quite fancied a son. So, you know, she kind of hoped one of us would turn out to be a boy. And again, you know, that brought up stuff for me around, actually, my mum wanted a son. That's not saying she didn't want me, but actually that brought up some stuff for me. And so this whole limiting beliefs piece, really understanding that things that have happened, they don't have to be traumatic experiences. I know my later life story is, you know, it's got some sadness to it, but actually really understanding that the things that happen to us in life, the things that people say, the things we learn, you know, we come into this world and we know nothing. We are born and we know nothing. We have no opinion. We have no knowledge. We are just humans being. We are soaking it up. We're taking it all in. We're learning all the time, and we take on all this stuff, and we take on the beliefs of others, and we take on statements and create our own beliefs. And this has been the game-changing stuff for me. This is what's unlocked my new life, if you like. And it's not about blaming. And that's really important, actually. So I often, when I'm working with clients on this, I'm like, you know, I often say, it's great if you can find that point, that something that might have created this, but it's not actually the be all and end all. What is more important is identifying what you're saying to yourself now. Because this is this piece around realizing how we are holding ourselves back. We cap our own potential. We literally stop ourselves being as brilliant as we could be by telling ourselves a whole load of, most often, BS. And it was game changing for me to start, and I'm still doing it all the time. So I love an analogy. So anyone that ever works for me knows I love an analogy. So I talk about our limiting belief suitcase that we carry through life with us. And what we do is we keep putting stuff in. We never take anything out. We just keep putting more and more in, because every experience, every interaction, everything that happens, our brains like to work with us and go, yeah, you're right, you're no good at that, I'm going to give you more evidence of it. And we pop that in the suitcase and we carry that along. Sometimes we've got 2. And actually, I kind of work with people around, you know, we just used the 25 years of corporate example. You know, this stuff doesn't go away overnight, but what we can do is start to identify and see it coming. We can see the things, we can hear the things and notice. So for me, that's been hugely game changing. And because, as you can probably tell, I'm quite passionate about it, from my own experience, actually, that's the path I've taken with my coaching. So I work very much with women who are getting in their own way, holding themselves back, and working out what is it that's going on there. What is it you're telling yourself? What's the story? And how do we break that apart? And where does it come from? If we can work out where it's come from, great. Because it's just game changing, just game changing. And I love when I see that moment in a client's face, when they're like, oh, that moment I had in the street, oh my God. And I'm not that child anymore. I don't have to believe that anymore. I can choose to believe something new. And I can choose to try and stop saying what will happen because I don't know. I can decide what's going to happen by giving something a new go. So yeah, does that answer the question? I went off on one there, didn't I? Because I get so passionate about limiting beliefs.
Absolutely, absolutely. The point that you make about making a different choice is so powerful.
But we can't make a different choice until we realize the choice we're currently making.
Yes.
And that's the really
beautiful. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, that's just sitting here now, I mean, I get goosebumps when I talk about it, because we don't get taught this stuff at school. We don't get taught this stuff in life, really. I'm sure I read, self-development books over the years, but somewhere along the line this didn't come up. And I guess that's the time-old piece, isn't it? That our brains are working with us. So they basically go, yeah, you're right, let's just focus on this bit. I always use the car example. So that wonderful example of when you're going to buy a new car and you decide what you're going to get, suddenly you see them everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not because there's more of them. It's because there is so much around us all the time. Our brain helps us by filtering, doesn't it? And I know so many people know that. And I guess it's the same with this. When I first discovered this, this game-changing light bulb moment of limiting beliefs, suddenly everything I read was telling me about limiting beliefs. All those books have been there previously, I just hadn't seen or heard, and I heard my own voice. And that's the game changer for individuals in the coaching journey, hearing your own voice, the awareness of what's going on for you, the awareness of what you're saying to yourself, the awareness of how you're holding yourself back, and then the belief that you can do something about it. Just game changing, absolutely game changing, and we can do it at any stage of life.
You know what you just did there? You read my mind and you answered the next question I wanted to ask.
Good.
It's what as I started listening to you about limiting beliefs, what I really wanted to ask you was, so for somebody who's in the story, they don't really know that they have a limiting belief. How do they start identifying some of those beliefs that are keeping them small and stuck? And there you go, listen to your own voice. Yeah. Shelley knows how to read the mind as well.
I'm not sure if that, in answer to the question, I'm going to repeat it somewhat. So I think there's a piece where the starting point for anybody is the decision. So I don't think any of us can help someone else make the decision. That's a self piece, and that's with triggers. We talked about the triggers earlier on. So I've shared my story and my triggers, and everybody has their own triggers, and they can be big, they can be small, but they can be a series of triggers. But somewhere along the line, someone decides, you know what, something's not feeling right. I'm not happy, or I want more, and and I might not believe I can have it, but I just want something to change. I want something to change, whatever that is. Once you get to that place, the answer to the question you asked there is the first thing I do with people, and I ask them to do for themselves, actually. And I often talk about this, in coaching isn't about the hour you spend with your coach. It's about what happens after the hour you spend with your coach. It's about how you keep working through that stuff. So the first thing is hear yourself. Notice what you're saying to yourself. I still do it now. I always use this example. Here we go. I'm about to do it. I'm a bit of a klutz in the kitchen. Okay. And limiting belief. And the amount of, oh God, Shelley, you're such a klutz. Shelley, you're so silly. Shelley, I'm not silly at all. And I'm actually not a klutz, because there's loads of other places in the house I don't make any mess at all. It's just the kitchen. And it's that, it's hearing all those statements, hearing, we all talk to ourselves, but really hearing what you say to yourself. That's where it's got to start, and picking up on those statements. And the classics are the I can't, I'll never be able to, people like me don't, I'm rubbish at. It's the self-deprecating statements that we've got to start to notice, because we rationalize and we normalize and we say, well, it's true, I'm not very good at this, and I can't do this, and I can't be good at everything. Well, who says you can't? If you want to, you might be able to. So yeah, it's hearing yourself, and that is the first exercise, if you like, that I will get people to do. I want you to notice the things you say over the next 7 days and make a note of them, actually, because I want you to read on that piece of paper what you're saying to yourself, so that we can start to unpick, where does it come from, and actually, is it even true? Because that's really the next bit, because half the time it's complete lie. We're telling ourselves lies all the time.
Yeah. Well, most of it is BS.
Total BS. I wasn't sure what we were allowed to say in this group.
Most of it is BS. We must not believe what our minds tell us.
Oh, yes. Do not believe everything you think. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Make the decision, then observe what's going on in here. And number 3, remember not to believe everything that your head tells you. A lot Absolutely. Of it is BS anyway.
And actually, so there's 2 parts to that. So don't believe everything you think, and actually ask yourself honestly, is it even true? And I talk about introduce yourself to the possibility that it is total BS. Look for the evidence, because if you can give me the evidence that it is true, then okay, then maybe we've got something to talk about. But half the time, there's much more evidence that it's not true. So when I first started talking about this, so I'm gonna get my little proud moment now. I ran the London Marathon when I was 30, right? Still dining on it 15 years later. Okay, still dining on it, but I'm proud. But here's a really good example. When I announced I was running the London Marathon, oh my gosh, if I had £1 for every person that said I could never run a marathon, I wouldn't necessarily be that rich, but I'd have a good amount of money. And I use this as a really good example of a limiting belief and how to work it through. Because actually we say, I could never run a marathon. Well, you know what? What if that's total BS? Where's the evidence? How do you know that's true? Have you ever tried to run a marathon? When you tried, what happened? Have you ever tried to run? Can you run? You know, asking yourself some really simple questions, and suddenly you realize that actually, well, maybe I could. Maybe there is a possibility I could. And then, of course, it's that piece around, okay, so now choose to tell you something else. Choose to tell yourself something else. I could run a marathon. I'll have to do some stuff to get there, but there's nothing to say I couldn't. The only person that's saying I couldn't right now, the only evidence that says I can't is me and my voice. And that's really important, that, you know, introducing yourself to the possibility that you are telling yourself complete BS right now. And actually let's see the evidence to the contrary.
Yeah. The example that you just shared from London Marathon, it is an example that can be extrapolated in all areas of life. Because I had one of those similar stories when I became a business owner. And my story was, I'm not a business owner, I'm not an entrepreneur. And then one day, through some coaching, it dawned upon me, why the hell are you not an entrepreneur? Have you done this before? No. What makes you decide that you're not an entrepreneur? You are new to it, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. You haven't done it because you have never tried it yet. Game changer.
Lightbulb, yeah. It's just incredible, isn't it? And I hope that anyone that's watching with us at the moment, you know, I love when we're talking about this stuff, because actually every time I talk about it, another one comes to me. And so I hope anyone that's watching right now is having a moment of like, yeah, actually I say those things. And, you know, because if you are, scribble it now. If you've got something in your head, scribble it down now and kind of go and work with that. Because actually, and I'm not saying it's easy, don't get me wrong, the easier part is when someone starts to help you notice it and you become aware. And this bit, okay, so let's ask myself some questions. Is it really true? The difficult part is changing the belief. Of course it is. It's back to that. If you've been carrying this belief in your trolley suitcase for 20 odd years, yeah, if it comes from a teacher that said something when you were 8 years of age, that's not going to go overnight tonight. That might take a bit of practice, a bit of, you know, and we can talk about affirmations and all kinds of things. And I'm someone that's not particularly comfortable with the traditional form of affirmation, standing in front of a mirror, saying something to myself. But I am comfortable with the process of retraining my brain and telling myself a new story. So, you know, I'm comfortable to sit there and, you know, like we are right now, or, you know, on my own with a piece of paper and say, actually, that's not true, is it, Shelley? What could be true is this. It's okay to believe this, and kind of allowing myself to believe a new story, to tell myself a new story. But that's then it's a repeat in the same way you've been repeating for the last God knows how many years. I'm not an entrepreneur. I could never run a marathon. I can't, I'm not able to. Well, yeah, I could if I want to. I may have to. I'm just as capable. You know, it's changing those words, and that's the tough bit, because we want to see instant results. We've gone through this really difficult piece and we want to see a result, and that doesn't come immediately. You know, that's real life, unfortunately. There's the straight talking bit. It doesn't work like that. I do not have a magic wand, neither does Carol. But what we can tell you is with practice, it gets easier and things start to shift. And that's the really powerful part of the process.
Yeah. What you said there about giving ourselves permission to be open to the possibility that we could write a new story. I think that's so powerful.
It's the biggest thing I see, that we don't give ourselves permission, because, and I guess ultimately there is a fear in there. You know, if I allow myself to believe I could, that means I've got to do stuff that's uncomfortable. That means that, you know, I might have to I might have to go through some failure before I get there. I might have to go through some scary stuff. I might have to face into the fear, and why would I choose that when I can stay nice and comfy over here with well, I can't do that. It's just not meant for me. I get it. But if you want something to change, then something has to change. So, yeah.
And we get to choose.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's that wonderful saying, isn't there? Make a choice to make a choice. Because even in not making a choice, you are making a choice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll leave that one hanging.
That's really heavy. That's really powerful.
Sorry, Wednesday afternoon.
Heavy as in insightful. Yeah.
Good.
Even when we don't make a choice, we are making a choice.
Yeah. Everything we do is a choice, as you said. And not doing something is still making a choice. It's making a choice to stay where you are.
Yeah.
And that's tough to take. That is tough to take. I get that. But that's that bit about being really honest with ourselves. And when we're really honest with ourselves, then we can also be really honest about what we want. And that's opening ourselves up to just all the possibilities of the world around us, which is exciting.
Yeah. Personally, I find one particular question really helpful when I'm faced with these choices, or when I find myself in situations where I've got to make one of those choices. And that is this story really helping me? Is it good for me?
Yeah. Brilliant question. How is this helping me? What? Yeah.
I may have done it for 20, 30 years, but is it really good for me?
Where's it got me so far?
And it may be a brilliant story that has got me here, but it may not get me where I want to get to.
Yes. Yeah. That one eye on where you're trying to get to. Yeah. Brilliant question.
Yeah. I find that useful.
Yeah.
So, Shelley, tell us, how do life triggers contribute to these light bulbs?
Well, I think life triggers get us thinking, don't they? That's the simplest piece. And very often, and I'm not saying for all, but very often, whatever the trigger is, gets you at that first stage of decision making. It gets you thinking, actually, is this what I want? Do I want something different? And that's where you start to open up the questions of, okay, if I do, what do I need to do differently? And I think in its simplest context, that's where, as we've talked about various types of triggers and various decisions that get made. Life triggers, it feels like a really big statement. We've all just had a huge life trigger. We've just experienced something that none of us ever thought we would. It will be written about in history books in the years to come. That's a really good example of life trigger, but they don't always have to be that big. It can sometimes, I'm trying to think of a small example, and all I've got in my mind at the moment is the last 18 months. There can be really small little triggers, and actually it can be accumulation of triggers that just don't make us feel great. And I guess that's what I mean by life triggers. It's that stuff that if it's not, it's a bit like the question you just asked, if it's not serving you well, if it's not making you feel great about life, then maybe explore it a bit more. Now, there are positive life triggers, don't get me wrong, and they take us in a very different direction. And actually they can open up the cans of limiting beliefs too, because sometimes that takes us to a place we really want to go to, and then we find ourselves, in a stumbling block. But I guess when it comes to triggers, I think the number one thing I would say to people is acknowledge the trigger. So a bit like we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, if there is something that's triggering for you, that's just got some thoughts worrying. I talked about how, there are these questions, and actually I sometimes wondered, how long had I been batting away my questions for subconsciously? And that's, that is a bit deep, but I think that some of those questions were there already. It's just that I didn't know any other way, so I just kept pushing them away. And actually, I would encourage anyone that if there are some triggers, if there's some things that have happened for you or are happening, or just little things that just feel a bit off and have got you thinking differently, it's back to permissions. Give yourself permission to explore it. Give yourself permission to think of it differently. Doesn't mean you have to do something about it. You might choose, your choice, your decision might be, I'm okay where I am. It's never a place of judgment. Everyone's decision is theirs. Acknowledge the triggers is what I'd say, and see where it takes you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great place to be in when you evaluate where you are, or when you take a look at where you are and come to the conclusion that no, I'm okay. This is where I want to be.
And you know what? I think you're right. And we talk about, in business, we talk about, quarterly reviews and resetting your goals. You don't just need a business plan, okay? You're allowed to have a life plan too. And having a life plan doesn't mean you're trying to make massive changes and get to this, far off place. Your life plan might be about, how do I maintain what I've got because it makes me really happy? Because that takes effort too. That still takes choices and effort. You might be about boundaries or whatever it is. But it's important to have that reflection and check in on where you're at in your world and whether that's working for you. And absolutely, if it is working for you, hats off to you. That's brilliant. And actually, there's just I'd say to anyone, be thankful for that, because that's not always the case for people.
Yeah. Then we can keep doing more of it.
And
what's having more fun.
Absolutely. What's working for you? Tap into that. Definitely.
Oh, this has been such a delightful conversation. So, Shelley, tell us, how can people experience some of this goodness by working with you? Is there something that's going on in your world? How can people work with you?
So there's a few ways. If anyone is kind of like, God, that woman resonates for me, how can I find out more about her? So in terms of working with me, I have two main ways of working with me. I, of course, like all coaches, have the opportunity to work one-to-one with me. I also have a group format. So I have what's called my Mindset Mastermind. It's a rolling process, so you can join that at any time. It's not a launch thing where you can only join once and then you have to wait. And that is a 16-week program that we work through all the stuff we've talked about today. We take you on that journey. And because and forgive my terminology, but I use the phrase rinse and repeat. When you learn this stuff, it is about rinsing and repeating, which is why my program is a rolling program that you can join at any point. And that's one way to work with me. And of course, if you've got something really specific that you think you need some bespoke support with, that's where one-to-one comes in. So they're the two main ways to work with me. If you're interested in just kind of seeing more of my style and how, what I'm all about, I have a free Facebook group as well. Sorry to the gents in the group, because it is a ladies group. It's called, and I'll go slowly because I speak fast at the best of times, but my group is the Successful Ladies Escape Lounge. And it is very simply a place for women who run businesses or are in the corporate world, who are in that place where they're starting to think about, I do want something to shift a bit, and I know that there's some stuff going on for me that's not working. So I am absolutely, as you can probably imagine, in there challenging us to think a bit differently. And I'm live in there every single week as well. So that's, a great place to just come and see more of me in action. But in terms of working with me, as I said, two ways, one-to-one or my Mindset Mastermind. In terms of finding me, I've made it really, really easy. Shelley Bosworth Coaching. It's as simple as that. If you put Shelley Bosworth Coaching into the social media platforms or into Google, you will find me, because that's me. I am Shelley Bosworth Coaching. Very proudly, I am Shelley Bosworth Coaching. So I'm very easy to find. Or as I say, the Facebook group is the Successful Ladies Escape Lounge.
And you are going to drop all the links underneath this video when we finish.
I will. Thank you.
Great. And you are on Facebook. Are you also on LinkedIn or any other platform?
I am everywhere, not all the time. Okay, so I am over on Instagram most days. So if you're looking for kind of pretty much daily, metaphorical kicks up the bum and a bit of inspiration, that's where I'm most of the time. See my Facebook group, I'm very active in there on a daily basis. I am here on Facebook. I am on LinkedIn. And yeah, I'm in all places. You can find me wherever your preferred place is. You'll find me in varying degrees.
Wonderful. Shelley, this has been such a delightful conversation, but before we let you go, if you had to share one big message with our audience, what would that be?
My one big message, I would keep it just really simple, and that is, you can. End of story. So whatever it is you're telling yourself you can't, you can.
Wow.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. I know we're so aligned on so much of what we've discussed today. I'm really grateful that we connected. I know your story. I think your story is incredible too, Carol. Thank you for letting me share mine. we're both so passionate about it. So it's just been great to chat with you today. Thank you.
Likewise, likewise. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom with us, Shelley. And people, remember what Shelley said, you can.
There you go.